I've been exploring lots of different solo builds in Throne and Liberty, mixing and matching different weapon types, skills, and specializations, and I think I've found the best combination so far, especially when it comes to survivability and self-healing. This is my build guide for the solo Templar in Throne and Liberty, combining the sword and shield with the wand for unparalleled self-healing and buff potential, with some surprising options for damage. This is really the perfect build for solo farming, in my opinion, or grinding contracts, upgrade materials, questing, and basically anything else in the game. Plus, you can easily respec this build as a tank if you want to pop into some group dungeons for even better loot. As usual, I'll go over everything you need to know to get started with this build, so let's jump right into it. Alright, so let's check out the character sheet first before we dive into things and look at the stat point distribution. 60 points in the strength. A lot of this you can get fairly early on from your weapons and armor, so I'll talk about how you can get those in a minute. But this is definitely your priority stat. Even before you hit level 50, you'll want to max this out. You can put 30 points in it pretty quickly. And then, like I said, the rest can come from gear pieces. But you can see the milestone bonuses that we're getting here. We got more max health, damage reduction, heavy attack chance is great. And eventually I do want to hit 70 on this to get those extra defensive bonuses. For your secondary stat, I recommend Wisdom for this build. We have a lot of casting that we need to do, so the extra max mana is great at level 30. I wouldn't put much more into that, just because those other milestones, debuff duration, cooldown speed, we really don't need those. And then anything else that you have left over, you can mix that into dexterity as well as perception. Now, in terms of the gear, obviously we're doing sword as the main weapon with the wand as our backup. So the Karnak's Netherblade is obviously a great option. It's going to help a lot with those primary stats that we talked about. The big strength bonus is really helpful. The max health is great. And then if you can trait this out, things like heavy attack chance, max health, hit chance, crit chance, those are going to be the traits that you want to look out for. Now, for the secondary wand, there's a couple of different routes that you can take. Early on, actually, I would recommend that you pick up this wand called the Wand of Skyward Blessing. This you can get from one of the early co-op dungeons. I forget which one it is specifically, but you can also get this from the reward bags from doing those world dungeon contracts. I ended up getting like 4 or 5 of these, so it's not hard to get. But the reason why it's good is for the bonus to mana cost efficiency. You can see you'll get about 16-17% cost reduction when you max out this wand. So this is really great early on, especially before you hit level 50, because it's going to help a lot offsetting the cost of casting all your abilities. And once you do hit level 50, you're going to get some other bonuses to cost efficiency, especially in the weapon mastery trees. So at that point, you can really graduate to something with more of a strength bonus. Tome of Proximate Remedy is a good option for that. You can see I'm getting 10 strength here, and I'm not even close to maxing this out yet. So this is what I would recommend for your wand once you hit level 50. In terms of armor, I just have a mix of resistance gear. You can get this from the main story and from doing your codexes. This has a nice mix of like max health, I think max mana for some pieces. So it is nice. Another armor set that I've been experimenting with a little bit lately is called Gloomguard. You can get this from one of the early co-op dungeons as well. A lot of these pieces have strength bonuses. So once you max this out around level 8, you'll get up to 4 strength per piece of this armor set. So it's actually really nice for any type of melee build like this one. So I think I have the Gloomguard hands and the feet at this point. For accessories, I always recommend that you pick up this 3-piece set. It comes from the main story and some of the exploration codexes. You can complete, really easy to get, and great bonuses, cooldown speed, endurance, melee defense, max health. You can use these items for a very long time, especially once you max out their levels. You can see you get some nice 2- and 3-piece set bonus effects from these as well. I did end up dropping the third one just because I got a couple other pieces that were better. I think Platinum Skull Ring is better. I managed to get this with a skill damage boost, which is pretty nice, and obviously the extra health is great for playing solo. Kunzite Bangle gives me more max health. And then another set you can check out if you want to be a little bit more damage focused. It's called Deadeye. This gives you stats like hit chance, critical, hit chance, etc. Oh, and I picked up this headpiece as well for the extra max mana and crit chance. So that's kind of the overall setup. Obviously, a lot of blues still. You don't need to worry about getting purple for everything. As I said, a lot of times the blue set pieces are actually better, especially when you trait them out and you start leveling them up versus just a plain set of purple gear. Now, if you're curious of where I got a lot of those pieces, is actually a dungeon that's really easy to farm. It's the level 50 Death's Abyss co-op dungeon. The cool thing about this build, the Templar, is you can very easily spec this to play as a tank. Just throw on a couple of taunts, change a couple of those specializations, and you can basically tank this dungeon, easily get into queues. And this is where you can get things like that Karnix Netherblade, some of the armor pieces I talked about. This is where you can get the full Gloomguard set. Although I think the best pieces are the ones that have strength. So that is the gloves and the boots. But you can get all 5 pieces here, and they buff different stats. You can get some nice jewelry here, too. This is where that Kunzite bangle and the Platinum Skullband come from. So yeah, if you want to gear up this build really quickly, just spec as a tank and then farm this dungeon. You'll be good to go. All right, let's jump into skills next, starting with our defensive skill. On the Templar build, that's going to be the shield survival technique that comes from the sword skill line. This just makes sense. I think it's probably the strongest defensive skill in this game due to the fact that you get a nice burst heal. When you do block those fury attacks, you get some extra damage reduction as well. So yeah, this one is just a no-brainer in my opinion. Keep in mind though, this does use a lot of stamina, especially if you're defending against 2, 3 different fury attacks at the same time. Though we do have some ways to regenerate stamina on this build, which we'll see in a minute. Now, in terms of the regular skill loadout here, I am using controller, and so I have my skills kind of grouped that way on different buttons. Right here, though, let's talk about our wand skills, our offensive wand skills, I should say, which are kind of like our curse setup over here. Starting with Touch of Despair. This is just really nice to afflict that weaken curse. We can stack this up to 3 times, and that's going to actually empower some of our other skills and passives. We have another weaken curse here called Time for Punishment. This one is really good because it reduces the skill damage resistance of an enemy, so you'll want to apply this to bosses, especially on some of the tougher enemies that you're fighting. Then we have Corrupted Magic Circle, and this is basically like an AoE damage over time effect. You'll want to cast this early as well. Basically, as soon as you have all of your enemies grouped up, go ahead and cast this on the ground. All of your enemies will get that dot effect. And then our strongest curse is actually Curse Explosion. And the way this works with Specialization is you can stack up that first ability, Touch of Despair, 3 times on a target, and that's going to boost the damage of Curse Explosion. The more stacks you have, the more damage it'll actually do. So you want to hold off on this one until you have at least 2, hopefully 3 of the Touch of Despair stacks applied. So that's how the curses work. It's a surprising amount of damage, and also, the debuff for skill damage. Really nice to basically start a fight with these curse abilities. Now, we do have some healing skills from the wand skill line too, so that includes Fountain of Life. This is just your bread and butter heal. We also have Mana Recovery specialized onto this, so that it's actually a heal and a sustain spell, which is really nice. And then we just have Swift Healing here as sort of a emergency heal. Honestly, you almost never need this unless you're fighting a big group of enemies, because your passive healing really is enough, but this is just here, for emergencies. But we can go ahead and switch over to our sword skills next. And the most important ability, I would say, is Annihilation Blade. This is the morphed version of your level 50 skill here. I forget what the basic name of the skill is called, but I do recommend that you specialize this to Annihilation Blade because it changes it from a single target skill into an AoE sort of upfront, you damage the enemies in front of you type of skill. So actually everything here that we've used and specialized into is AoE damage. And that's really helpful for playing solo especially. You don't want to have a lot of single target skills. You want to have as much AoE damage as possible. And almost everything in our toolkit, the way it's set up, is doing that AoE damage to multiple targets. But the other great thing about this too is it does increase your sword skill damage by 20%. So your other skills are going to do more damage as well. So you definitely want to sort of start your sword rotation with that ability and then follow that up with your other damage skills. Now, the other kind of like bread and butter DPS skill that you're going to cast all the time is called Piercing Strike. This is the morphed version of Shield Strike, which is the first ability in the sword skill line. And so this is really good too, because with specialization, you can also change this from single target to this is a 60-degree conal area of damage. Now, I also recommend that you max out this skill early because the damage scaling is quite good. You can see it's almost 600% damage at Epic rank 5. Now remember, it's not single target damage. It is conal, so you're going to damage all the enemies in front of you. Now, in addition to that, I grabbed Witty Strike, and this is it does decent damage, but it's more for sustain. You can see the base effect here recovers 220 mana, so that's more than the cost to cast it. But then with Specialization, we also recover stamina. So we get mana and stamina back. For casting this, you can cast it up to twice. So that's why, if you have blocked like a big set of Fury attacks, let's say you blocked 2, 3, 4 Fury attacks in a row, your stamina is going to be really drained. You can then attack with Witty Strike, and you get a bunch of stamina back, almost probably back to full, so then you can block again. So it's a really nice combo on this specific build. That one does AoE damage too, by the way, and then our last AoE damage skill, Annihilating Slash. This does even more damage, even bigger range, and it does bonus damage to weakened targets. So this actually does synergize really nicely with the curse, the weakened curses that you can put on with the wand skills. So that's kind of our damaging skills for sword. We do also have Strategic Rush here on the skill bar. This is mainly like an interrupt. This is great against casters. Really good in those sort of open world dungeons where you have like lots of walls and lots of hallways. And if you rush a target into a wall, they're also stunned for 2 seconds, which is really good, like I said, for interrupting casters. And then we have just a buff here, Great Fury. This is the morphed version of it's a defensive skill that gives you, I forget what the name of this skill is called at base, but it basically gives you and your group damage reduction. You can change this with Specialization, so it only applies to you, and it gives you a stronger effect. This is great if you're playing solo, obviously, but then you can also morph it into it gives you skill damage increase. You can see this is boosting my skill damage over 100, and I'm not even to epic quality on the rank for this skill yet. So I think it's a really great way to go. For this build, we have plenty of defense already. We need, offense more than anything, so you can actually cast Great Fury first. Gives you that 9-second boost. Then you can cast Annihilation Blade. That's 6 seconds of 20% bonus skill damage, and then go into all of the rest of your shield damage abilities. That's a really good combo to practice. By the way, if you need any help, setting this build up, or you need to check it out later, I will have a written guide down in the description and the pinned comment. I'll have all the skills listed there, as well as the specializations, the passives, weapon mastery, and everything else. So don't stress. There's a link there that explains everything, but let's go ahead and jump into the passives next. So if you saw my previous solo build, the Invoker Mage, which is basically staff and wand, very similar concept here, where it's a vampire style of build with this passive, Vampiric Contract. Basically, when you deal damage to an enemy that has a curse, you restore health. And we have this almost maxed out, so you'll get about 16% healing back whenever you damage an enemy that is cursed. So I do recommend picking this one up as soon as you can, leveling it up as far as you can. And then obviously in our rotation, we start with the curse, and then every damage ability that we do heals us back. That's why you really don't need a lot of healing on this build, other than Fountain of Life, and you're only using that, sporadically. So great passive, make sure you use that early on. We also have Devotion and Emptiness. This increases skill heal, decreases cooldowns by 10% during the day. That's an amazing buff to have, actually. That's during the day. The nighttime version is different. It increases your skill damage over time and decreases curse skill cooldowns. I don't think that's quite as powerful, but it is helpful as well. So this is a good one. Wraith's Beckon is just a passive boost to your curse duration. So you saw how many different curses we have on the build. This does help just make those last a little bit longer. And then Noble Revival. This increases our skill heal by about 2% for 1,000 max mana. So we're anywhere between like 10 to 14% increased healing, which is really nice. So all of these are the wand passives. Then we've got the sword passives, a little bit less useful, I think. The wand passives are definitely better, but Skillful Evasion does increase all of your evasion types up to 200. Resilient Mind gives you some mana back when you evade an attack or when you block, so you'll get a lot of extra mana sustain from this one, which is good. Aegis Shield increases our shield damage reduction. And then I just put on Impenetrable. This is going to increase our defense based on the number of targets in range. This one is actually really good defensive passive there. Before we get to the skill specialization, let's actually talk about weapon mastery. So for the sword weapon mastery, I'm actually not a big fan of the different skill trees here. It is really good for tanking. You know, if you are specifically wanting to turn this build into a tank, then you can do the boss skill tree is actually really good. By the way, if you guys want to see the tank version of the Templar build, let me know down in the comments. I could create a video for that one too. It's really good. But what I'm doing basically with the skill tree is I'm just picking up as many passives as I can. So I went to, 2 levels deep into all the skill trees, and then I'm going into the collision tree a little bit, but nothing that really does a lot of impact for playing solo. So yeah, I would just recommend picking up as many passives here that you can. The wand skill tree I think is a little bit more simple. So I went with the weaken skill tree in this case, and that's really going to just buff our curses, obviously, but this also gives a lot of good sustain and recovery. So we get, mana regen here. Spiritual focus is really good. That's 6% cost efficiency. The extra curse duration actually does work on this. Cooldown speed, max mana. Yeah, I would go with the weaken skill tree for the wand. But let's go ahead and jump over to specialization, starting with the sword skills. So I talked about shield strike. You're going to want to spend 5 points to morph this to piercing strike. That's just a really good use of 5 points there. So stalwart bastion, that was the name of that skill that I forgot the name of. You can morph that to great fury for 7 points. And so that's going to change it from a defensive skill to now increasing skill damage. And then you can do focus on target. And that's going to improve it by about 50%, 60% more when it's just you as a solo player. That makes more sense. Annihilating Slash does have some good upgrades. Consecutive use, you get an extra cast. Radius increase, obviously you get a wider radius for the damage, which is good. Witty Strike, you definitely, if you're going to use this, you need the upgrades. So stamina recovery also recovers stamina by 12 per target. And then you can do the consecutive use upgrade here so that you get to cast it twice. So like I said, you can, fill up your stamina bar back to full if you have enough targets that you're hitting and you have the stamina upgrade. And then you can see Annihilation Blade. I've taken all the upgrades here, which is really useful. Shot at Victory is what the base skill is called, but then, this makes it AoE. You then get even more. Oh, it's 30% damage. Okay, so that doesn't show up in the tooltip, but it is 30% damage boost to your sword skills, and then you can increase the duration by 2 seconds. So yes, definitely pick up all the upgrades for that skill. For the wand skill tree, we did upgrade Touch of Despair with the effect duration upgrade, and then radius increased I think is really important. So that curse is going to spread to 2 additional nearby targets, and that's going to help a lot with Curse Explosion too. So speaking of that Curse Explosion, we did the damage increase specialization. So you can see there, Touch of Despair's damage boosts it by 10% per stack. That's, again, up to 3 stacks. Corrupted Magic Circle, I did boost the damage here as well. Time for Punishment, this is just a effect duration buff. I think that's pretty simple, and it's a good bonus to have. 3 extra seconds there. And then Fountain of Life, you can do a lot here. Mana recovery, like we talked about, 40 mana per tick is actually really good. And then increasing the effect duration by 2 seconds. But that's all the upgrades. Like I said, if you want to see that in the written version, check out the guide linked down below. I'll have everything there listed out for you. All right, so how do you play this build? Well, let me grab just a stack of enemies here. I'm in Shadowed Crypt. And so we can kind of show you how this works once we get a good stack of enemies grouped up. Let me grab this one and this one. Yeah, here we go. So you want to kind of circle around until you get as many of them sort of circled up and stacked up. You can use Shield Rush to help you do that a little bit quicker. And block that incoming Fury attack. And then it's all about curses. So go ahead and stack all of those. Corrupted Magic Circle as well to get the dot going. Don't do Curse Explosion yet. You want 2 to 3 stacks of Touch of Despair first. So 1 more stack here, and then I can explode the curse. There we go. Now switching the sword, I'm going to buff with Great Fury. Follow that up with Annihilation Blade, Piercing Strike, Witty Strike ×2, and then Slash ×2. That's all of your offensive sword abilities. From there you can go and refresh those curses, Touch of Despair, reduce the skill damage reduction, make sure that damage over time from Corrupted Magic Circle is up, Touch of Despair, and then Curse Explosion. And let me move around a bit here. Just line these guys up. Make sure they're lined up for Annihilation Blade. Piercing Strike. Block that. Let's use Witty Strike to get all that stamina back. Then Slash 2 times. Let's go ahead and lay down the Healing Circle. We're still really not taking much damage at all, and these guys are almost dead, so let's redo the curse effects. Annihilation Blade is almost ready. And so again, we're going to just line everything up in a straight line so we can blade into them. Piercing Strike, Witty Strike combo into Annihilating Slash 2 times. Make sure we are refreshing those curses as we block. And yeah, most enemies are dead now, so I'm less worried about it. I'm just refreshing my damage skills as they come off cooldown and then blocking where I need to. But that's pretty much it. But with that said, that's going to wrap up this solo build guide for the Templar class in Throne and Liberty, mixing in those sword with the wand skills. Hope you guys enjoyed this one and you found it informative. If you found this helpful at all, do me a favor and crush that like button so that YouTube knows to share this video with others. Now, as I mentioned, there is a written guide for this one as well over on my website. That's hacktheminotaur.com. Over there, you can find all the skills listed out in order, as well as the best passives, all the specialization options, and everything else you need to know to make this build work. But like I said, you can easily respec this build to play as a tank as well if you want to do more of the group content in the game. If you guys would like to see a build video for that one, make sure to let me know in the comments as well. But as always, thanks so much for watching. Hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.